Hey guys, welcome back to this week's podcast series, all things pre-dent and dental school applying. So this week we're going to start diving in. Hopefully a lot of you guys are starting the cycle this year and are applying to dental school now and getting all of that exciting stuff going. So we figured it'd be cool to kind of break down the application process and the cycle. And hopefully that's of use to you guys since it is kind of coming up right now. So this week, before we break it down, we're going to start talking about primary applications, secondary applications, and all things getting started with the AADSAS application. So to kind of start off, I want to just preface this all by saying that Crack the DAT has an awesome application service where it breaks down applying to dental school and getting edits and application feedback on your extracurriculars, your personal statement, as well as your secondary applications. And you don't have to pay for one big application package. You can kind of break it into going into just your personal statement or just your extracurriculars, your most importance, or you could go into your secondaries, just anything you can pick. You can pick any of those sections in particular if you would like more help on those. But that's an awesome resource and definitely gives you a really great setup with an expert to get feedback and to learn and proofread and grow and make sure you're putting your best foot forward when you send your application in. So that brings us to this week's applying to dental school, primary and secondary applications. So as always, there's discounts. Of course, get some savings for your DAT prep and for subscriptions and everything. So 10% off. The code this week is right there. Apply crack DAT 10.
The SN1 reaction is the
In keyholes or apertures, you're given an object.
Figure out the molar mass of it. So we were given the mass, and you get.
And then, as always, as every week, stay tuned for the 50% off winner at the end. Make sure you stay tuned. That's a huge discount and awesome giveaway. So make sure you stay tuned for the end of this. So, to start off, so the primary. So we're just gonna go through some general tips first, and then we'll kind of break into each section of the primary application, and then I'll go into secondaries at the very end, and that's kind of where we'll finish up for the application cycle, for the application process. So for general tips for the AADSAS application, first thing I always like to tell people, and I really highlight it here, is you want to submit your application early. Latest you should be submitting it is around August. I ended up submitting mine like early July of last year, but I saw when I was looking into studying, or when I was looking into submitting my application last year, I was looking into when I should submit it, and I saw a graph. I don't remember who made it or where they got the data, but I saw a graph of acceptance rates and like likelihood of getting an interview, and your likelihood, since the dental school application is a rolling admission, you're evaluated on a rolling basis. Your likelihood of getting an interview when you submit later is like exponential. So it exponentially declines as you get later into the application cycle. So that's really, really important that you submit early because you want to give your application the best odds possible to getting a interview invite from the school. So the earlier you submit, the better. But I always like to caution people that that doesn't mean that you should be submitting an incomplete application. So if you're not ready, you need to get some proofreads. You need to really flesh out your personal statement. You don't know if it's the best. You need to make sure your wording is correct. You need to kind of fluff up some other stuff. Don't submit it with errors just because you want to get it submitted early. That's definitely not the way to do it, but you really want to be conscientious of the timing of when you submit. Also, you have to make sure that your recommendations, DAT, all of that is in when you submit, because everything has to be processed in order for your application to be sent to the schools. So if you send your transcripts in and send your DAT in, and like your transcripts has to be verified, your DAT has to be verified, your recommendations need to be processed, and you're still gonna be waiting for a couple weeks after you press submit for your applications to really be fully sent to the schools. So that kind of also is another thing to think about too with when it comes to timing, is you need to think about, okay, if I have this DAT score coming in, my transcripts aren't going to be ready until 2 weeks from now or like a week from now, and that's going to take a week to process and verify my information. Then I also need to have my recommendations in. They're getting in like tomorrow or something. You submitting your information, if it's not ready, you kind of have a week window to really fluff it and perfect it before you send it in, because all your other stuff isn't in, so your application isn't going to be sent yet, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of a little bit of a game you have to think about, and you have to really make sure you're considering when you're submitting your application. So another thing too that I found really helpful is write all your blurbs. So I don't remember the exact character count, but for your little extracurricular boxes or volunteering, shadowing experiences, you have a character count. So I always made sure I was doing those little blurbs on a Word doc and counting the characters and really editing and making sure that my punctuation was correct and everything was correct on the Word doc. And then I was just copying and pasting it into the application service. I felt like that worked so much better than having just writing in that Word block, because then sometimes you go over the limit, you go under the limit. You want to be pretty much around the limit. And if something's not really adding up, or you're over or under and you need to add, it gets a little confusing working inside the application. So just having everything, and it's also easier to proofread and spell check and all of that on Word than it would be in those little boxes. Also call the help center with any questions or statuses of the documents. So the help center of the AADSAS application is actually awesome, and they're super available and really helpful. But obviously they're the only ones who really truly know what's going on with your application. You can ask people who have done it before, who did it last year, or who successfully applied to dental school, and they can tell you their personal experience, but they can't tell you like what's the status of your documentation, or hey, I submitted this is my reference number, what is, like, have you processed this, have you received this? And they're always really available and also like super helpful and have all the answers to the questions that you need, and they're very nice and definitely a great resource to utilize. Also, I wanted to make a quick note. I didn't apply to any of the Texas schools, so I can't speak personally to any of this, but I know that there is a separate application for the Texas schools. I think it's called like TAMAS or something. And that's not through the AADSAS application. So if you're applying to Texas schools, you're going to want to do that and really look into that. Also, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I had a friend who applied to Texas schools, and I'm pretty sure it's like a one check box. You can apply to all of them. So I've heard that the recommendation is if you're applying to one, to apply to them all, because it's pretty easy and streamlined that way. But it is an entirely separate application. So if you like I just felt like for me it wasn't worth it. I'm not from Texas. I didn't see myself going to Texas. So the application was just going to be a pain and extra money and extra time that I didn't want to spend away from my other applications. Okay, so now we're going to get into it. So I'm breaking down all of this into each section. So when you go into your AADSAS portal, you're going to have all of these sections, and it's going to tell you, you're going to click on the sections, and then it'll tell you it'll prompt you to answer the questions, and you just kind of fill it out. So the first part, this one, personal information, is very, very straightforward. It's all the facts about you. So it's metrics, it's background, race, ethnicity, citizenship, parents, etc. Stuff that's pretty easy. This was actually the first section that I did. Like I made my account probably the first day the application opened, like June 1st, I think was last year. I opened it, I saw what I was dealing with, and I filled this out because it only took me, I don't know how long it took me, but not too long. And it's just facts. It's just factual information about your background. So that's like a good place to start, and it kind of gets you feeling like you did something, but not actually having to really spend a lot of time, which is a nice place to start. So then we moved into academic history. So academic history is a little bit confusing for a variety of reasons. So this is all like your educational history. So it goes into high school, it goes into colleges, DAT score, all of that. So everything that you can think about, like with education, that's what's happening here. So with regards to college, what gets a little bit complicated is study abroad, summer courses, different degrees, etc. So if you got like a bachelor's, you got an associate's, you got a master's, you got a something, that's where it gets a little bit more complex. You just need to be really vigilant about putting exactly what's on your transcript into the transcript entry, because you have to enter all your courses, and then you have to enter like the credit hours and then the grade. And that's where so I studied abroad in London, and I studied abroad in London, got my grades through a U.S. university who did their grading system differently than mine. I also took like summer classes to take prereqs, and those universities did their courses and their credit hours differently than my home university, and I didn't know if I was supposed to be converting them to like a standard unit or putting in exactly. So this is where I was saying that the AADSAS helpline is super helpful. I called them like all the time with regards to transcript and just confirm what exactly I was supposed to be putting. But the general rule of thumb is that you need to put exactly what's on your transcript. So ultimately what happens is when you send your transcript in, the AADSAS application service then verifies everything that you wrote on your application with your transcript entry, and then they calculate all of their own personal stuff. So everything you entered, they calculate your cumulative GPA, your science GPA, your whatever, but to send to the schools, but they need you to have entered the correct information. So they're going in with your transcript and verifying everything that you wrote is correct and matches your actual transcript. So if you have something different than what's on your transcript, like a different name or a different lab, or you didn't put it in exactly, that's when the application service will ding you, and you won't be verified and you won't be confirmed until after you correct that mistake. And then ultimately your application is being held up because of that, which is absolutely not what you want, because you, like I said from the beginning, you want to submit your application as early as possible. So having it held up because of a transcript error is just really unideal. So yeah, do not paraphrase or reword. So what I kind of was hinting at for that is a lot of classes you probably know colloquially as something else, like cum phys or anatomy is like, I don't know what, stuff like that, like biochem. If it says like biochemistry 2 or like whatever the specific actual formal name is on your transcript, you're gonna want to type it in exactly as it appears. So I think for my example, like my like gen bio was called like genes, molecules, and organisms or something, and instead of like writing and knowing it as like bio 2, I had to write like genes, molecules, organisms, whatever. So that's what I meant by like don't paraphrase, don't reword, like fully like print out your transcript, pull up your transcript, and write exactly what it is. And like I said, pay attention to the course credit hours. Those differ really drastically between schools. So if you've taken multiple classes at multiple different schools or gotten different degrees, etc., really pay attention to what you're entering there. Also, like I kind of mentioned earlier, you're going to need a transcript from each school that you attend. So that was really not frustrating, but I had taken a summer course after my freshman year that I'd like honestly forgotten about. I like didn't even realize. I took like one summer course in like second semester. It was like 3 weeks long. And since I was entering it and I had and I wanted credit for it, I had to call the school that I didn't even know like my ID from and figure it out. And they only sent paper copies in the mail, so I had to send it directly to AADSAS, and that was like holding me up. And I was grateful that I figured it out earlier in my application process, but I just wanted to make sure that point's really reiterated because I didn't fully comprehend what that meant when I was applying, and that definitely could have been an area that would have held up my application and getting it submitted. So you definitely just want to get all your transcripts in and make sure you're on that process early. Like even before you really start entering your transcripts or even start fully finishing your application, you can get your transcripts sent to AADSAS. So just get on top of that and get that in the beginning. Also, some schools don't, like one of my schools doesn't send, like I said, electronic version. So I had to send a paper copy. You also there's a whole part on the application section, or on the transcript section, but you have to click on a thing and include the transcript request from the application service to the school attached with it. So then they have to send that back with the piece of paper that says that they're being requested to have a transcript sent. It's just like little processes that you have to just pay attention to and make sure you're on top of. So also you have to obviously add your DAT here. One thing to note is that you don't have to have taken your DAT to start your application. I know I was like kind of hesitant or wary about that. I hadn't taken my DAT until mid-June, and I started my application, like I said, on June 1. So you don't need to have taken your DAT, and also you can submit a future test date. So I like went in my DAT and it said like test date, and I chose a future test date, which is the day I ended up taking my test. And then you can have your DAT sent right after you take it. So that's all pretty straightforward, but just make sure you pay attention to that. But you don't need to have it already taken when you get to that section. You can take it while you're applying.
Succeed on your dental admission test. Study less and score higher. Check Crack the DAT now at crackdat.com.
So the next part is supporting information. So this is kind of like the meat of the application, where you get to shine, where you get to really show and emphasize yourself and really show off what you've done in the last however long, 4, 5, 7, 10, however many years you've been really working towards the goal of getting into dental school. So here you have obviously your recommendations. The way that they do it is it's either 4 individual recommendations or 1 committee plus 1 individual. So my school did a committee letter, but I was also allowed to submit 1 additional letter of rec in addition to my committee letter. But if you don't have a committee letter, you can only do up to 4 individual letters. And then you just kind of add the information of the contact who's going to be submitting the letter on your behalf, and then they deal with it all from there. So then your experiences, this is where you enter all of your extracurriculars, your shadowing, your volunteering, etc. Everything that you've done that's really, given you the holistic applicant that you are. One thing to note is that you do need exact dates, so like times, dates, etc., that you've dedicated to that experience. Obviously, if you're applying now, this doesn't really apply to you, but the best piece of advice I ever got when I was going through my pre-dent journey was that freshman year, a senior who was applying to dental school said, you need to write down everything you've done and the date you did it and the hours that you spent doing it. So I had a little log and I logged everything, which was so helpful for this section. So I was able to just quickly look back and fill in the hours and calculate accurately how much time I'd spent. But obviously, if you're applying, that doesn't really apply to you. If you aren't applying, definitely do that. That's an awesome tip that I was given and really, really helped me in the long run when it came to the formulating exactly what I had done and all the hours and adding everything up accurately. Something to note here is that you can highlight 6 most important things, and you're going to want these 6 most important things to really give a holistic view of yourself. So what I mean by that is you don't want to highlight every shadowing experience you've had. You probably have had around almost 6, maybe 4, maybe 3, but you don't want to highlight all 4 of those. You want to highlight a volunteer. You want to highlight a shadow. You want to highlight a leadership. You want to highlight an extracurricular. You want to highlight a something. You want to highlight one of each thing that you are passionate about and you can talk about, but also kind of provides the holistic view of yourself. So you're not just a person who shadowed and worked as a DA for 3 years. Like, you want to have a breadth to your experiences. And that's kind of what you want to highlight. Achievements. So this is where you enter all your awards and achievements you've received. You can highlight up to 4. Similarly, you want to highlight the ones that kind of give an interesting approach to you, because those are the ones that are going to be like emphasized on your application when they send it to schools. Also, it's okay if you don't have any achievements or awards. It's okay if you don't have the maximum number. It's also okay if you don't have the maximum number of experiences either. Just be true, be honest. Don't lie, obviously. Like, this is not a place to lie. And put everything that you've done on the application. That's the other thing, is it can be tiny, it can be very small, but put it on there. You want to just get everything that you've done and you've put effort into onto the application so that they see the full picture of you. So then the last part is personal statement, arguably the most important part of the application. I have 100 advice and tips and tricks and all of that for the personal statement. I've read a lot of personal statements and I've helped a lot of people with personal statements. And I also am on the Crack the DAT personal statement application service team. So please go through that service, and we can help you craft an awesome personal statement. But kind of just generally what I like to tell people on like a very surface level is make it unique, show your passion, and have others proofread. Those are like the 3 biggest things I can think of that I always tell people when they're looking to apply. Is you want to make it unique, you want to stand out, you want to be yourself, you don't want to be a cookie cutter person, you want to be someone special. You want to show passion, so you want to have, it doesn't have to be necessarily about, I mean, obviously it has to be kind of about dentistry. You can't write an essay about how you love the ocean and get into dental school, but it doesn't have to be that I've been a dentist. I wanted to be a dentist since I was 3, and I have worked tirelessly to make that dream come true. It could be a story of a musician. It could be a story of a athlete. It can be a lot of different things. But you want to show how your passion, let your passion and your desire to go into this field really come through. And then lastly, have others proofread. You will never have enough set of eyes looking at your personal statement. I think I had maybe 10 people read it. And I had them read it over and over. I would have, like, every week I found another thing that I wanted to change, another word I could substitute, a comma I wanted to evaluate, different wordings, different structures. It's just, you're always going to you can always edit it and it can always be better. So just never be, well, obviously get to a point where you're happy with it and you're content, but really always push to make sure that's the best crafted essay that it could be. So program materials. So this is where you enter the specific schools you're applying to. So you'll write your list of schools, and then they'll come up as a little box. And then each school kind of has its own little questions. A lot of them are like legacy stuff, like do you have anyone or do you know anyone at the school, family stuff like that. And then some ask questions, some don't. It's very variable by the school to school. So there's not really a lot of like cookie cutter answers or advices I can give you here. But it does all vary by school. So those are pretty straightforward though. Like other sections on the application, it's pretty prompted and you just kind of follow the prompts and arrive at the end through that. Okay, so then now we're at secondary. So once you submit all of that, your primary goes to the school. And then once your school says, I've received your application, blah, 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 please fill out this secondary application in order to be like fully submitted. So then they send you a link, and this is where the school directly communicates with you. So far you've only been communicating through this AADSAS portal, and now you're talking directly to the school. So the school will send you this, and each school is unique. So some schools I applied to don't have any questions for you. They just make you pay. Unfortunately, that's one thing I did want to note, was that you do have to pay for secondary applications. So that's also something to consider when you're applying, is that each secondary application ranges from like I don't know, $80 to $100, but you're paying $100 to each school. So if you're applying upwards to 15 schools, you're paying like $1,000 in secondary applications, which is a lot of money. And some schools have questions. Some schools have really basic questions. Some schools have really intense questions. Some schools don't send you the questions until you're being considered as like a final applicant, so to speak, before you get an interview. Some schools send everyone questions. Some schools have general questions. Some schools have really intense questions. It varies by school to school. So that's also a pretty unique process, and it's not generalizable at all. But one thing that's unique or general to all of them is that you must, well, not obviously must, but you should absolutely submit the secondaries within 2 weeks of receiving the prompts. So if you get a secondary, you pay the $80, they send you the questions or they give you a link to the portal for their specific application. You then need to have everything submitted and be done with that application 2 weeks from that date. That's just super important because it shows you're on top of it. It shows that you really want the school. It shows that you're interested. It shows that you're engaged. If you go longer than 2 weeks, you're not showing interest. You're not showing that they're a priority. It's just not professional. It's not on top of it. It's lazy kind of. It's just not recommended at all. So with that being said, I've heard two different strategies with regards to secondaries. So some stagger them. So you submit them in different capacities at different times so that you can dedicate 2 weeks to 3 and then dedicate 2 weeks to 3, et cetera, et cetera. Or if, like for me, only that summer, I dedicated my entire time to doing applications. So I was like, bring them on. I was submitting them all at the same time. And I was working on like 5 at the same time. And I was on top of it and I was getting them done. And I wanted to get them done because I wanted to keep busy. And I that was what I was dedicating my time to. So you can definitely do them all at once as well. One thing I do suggest with all of that is to organize yourself and know the submission dates. So if you're applying to 10 schools, upwards of 10, 15 schools, it can get really confusing and muddied about which schools you've applied to, which ones you haven't, where you're, like what dates they need to be submitted by. So having a big Excel spreadsheet and having this school, date submitted, date secondary due, here's the calendar, what schools I'm going to work on today, all of that. I had a planner, because I like to handwrite things. So I had a little planner and I had mapped out what schools I was going to work on that day. I mapped out the dates. I mapped out the dates I wanted to have it submitted by so I could have people proofread them before then, stuff like that. So you're just really organized on your time and you're never letting an application fall through your fingers, so to speak, just because of timing. Also, similar to the primaries with your little extracurricular blurbs, write the secondaries in a Google Doc. So make a little Google Doc or a Word doc for every secondary and copy and paste the questions and then write the answers, because if you don't do that, it's going to get really confusing and you might accidentally submit an unanswered one or a partially answered one. You don't want to get bogged up on any of that. Also, similarly to your personal statement and everything else you essentially submit on this application, proofread, have others read it out loud, read it to your friends, read it to your brother, read it to your sister, read it to your parents. Just read it to everyone and read it out loud and catch those little errors, those little mistakes that you would otherwise not catch, because you want to make sure you're having the worst thing that could have happened or could happen is you submit something that has a grammatical error. Then the school is looking at the fact that you messed a grammar error and not the fact that you submitted an awesome, meaningful statement. So definitely proofread. And then lastly, Crack the DAT also has extremely helpful resources on secondaries. So definitely look into those as well. I know it gets complicated and it gets tough and it gets hard when you have a lot and you have a lot to write, but Crack the DAT does have resources to help you with those as well. So look into those online. So that's it. And then I think next week we'll start talking about more further parts of the application process. But for now, like we talked about earlier, we've come to the end of this. So we have a 50% off winner going to be announced. We'll DM as always. And as every week, we have a 10% off code. This code for this week is apply crack DAT 10. So thanks for listening, guys. See you next week. Also, feel free to continue to ask questions and keep sending them our way. I love to help and be of a resource to all of you guys as you navigate this journey and really helpful go through it with someone else. So have a good week, guys. Bye.